Welcome back to Swordman Josh Gaming. And since I had such a good response for the deck tech for the $50 Commander deck I did earlier today, I figured I'd go ahead and do another one tonight. Looks like I'm having a problem with chat. I'm not sure why. Hopefully it comes back. But a very casual, out of the box difference for a commander that a lot of people like to play, but I took a completely weird spin on it and made something casual that is also normally considered competitive, and a lot of people will go after you for, but they can see it coming, and I've had a lot of fun playing this deck. The commander that we're playing with is actually Muldrotha, and again, I have this weird glare on the card, but it's Muldrotha the Gravetide. I picked this commander mostly because I needed these color supports as well for the deck that I wanted to build around, but she also serves as an emergency backup plan for if things go horribly wrong. So what Muldrotha does is during each of your turns, you can play up to one permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. So that would be artifacts, lands, enchantments, planeswalkers, creatures. That's it, I think. So not instants or sorceries. So she serves as a backup plan. She is 3 black, green, blue. So obviously it's a black, green, blue deck. So the mana base is going to be a lot worse or a lot more expensive in this deck than it was in the Tetsuko deck, but still not horrible. I had a lot of the lands that I needed for the land base for the Muldrotha deck already in my collection. So this deck, like I said earlier, I don't like to spend more than $100 at Card Kingdom to build any one deck. Then I'll add in for my own personal collection. I think this deck I spent maybe $45 or $50 at Card Kingdom and then added the rest for my own personal collection. So what this deck is it's a Infect deck, which most people will probably turn off the video now that I've said Infect, but it's an Infect Proliferate deck, and it takes a long time to win, but it's a lot of fun to play, and being since it is spread out, it's not like you target one person and then you immediately annihilate that person, then everybody gets pissed off and goes and kills you. It actually is meant to just get one poison counter on each person and then just proliferate for the win. So we're going to go through this like we did the last one. I'll go through the Infect suite and the creatures that I'm running for that, then the Proliferate suite, the Removal suite, the Mana Rocks, and then the extra cards, and then we'll go through the mana base. So let's get into the Infect suite first. And these are in no particular order, and there is in the Removal and a couple other places, some other place to get, because Infect actually gives poison counters. There's a couple other ways where we can get poison counters onto somebody, but Infect's creatures are the easiest way to do it. So we'll start with, this is both a Mana Rock and an Infector, and that's Plugmere. So it's 2 mana for a 1/1 with Infect, and you can tap and add it 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. So great for coming down early. Our next Infector that we're running, actually this isn't an Infect creature. It's Relic Putrescence. It's an enchant artifact actually, but it didn't fit in with Removal. But you enchant an artifact, and whenever it becomes tapped, its controller gets a poison counter. So this is great for putting on those early Mana Rocks, the Soul Rings, the Mana Vaults, things of that nature, where people want to tap them to ramp out, and this makes them pay for it. Our next Infector is Flustermite. So it's a black and a colorless, and you'll see that a lot of these Infectors are very low casting cost to try to get out early and get a poison counter on everybody. This is a 1/1 Infector with lifelink. Our next one, which this can hose a lot of people, is the Phyrexian Crusader, black colorless. It has first strike as a 2/2 Infector with protection from red and white. What makes this even better is since it's a first striker, if it's going up against a regular creature, it will put its infect counters on that creature first before it deals damage because it's a first striker. So it can effectively take down something that is for equal trade that's double its power. Our next one is the Blight Mamba. So green and a colorless with Infect, and it's a 1/1er, but you can regenerate Blight Mamba. So this is great for being able to just swing in and give -1/-1 counters to creatures, or it's a great defender since it can regenerate. Our next one, I didn't know whether to put this in the Proliferate pile or in the Infect pile, but it's Viral Drake. It's blue and 3 colorless for a 1/4 flyer with Infect. However, it also has, for a mana sink in mid-game, blue and 3 colorless to Proliferate. There's another card in here in the Proliferate pack that has the same ability on a creature to be able to proliferate off that creature for a mana sink. Our next card, and probably one of the best cards in this deck, is actually Rats for a black, and a colorless. It's a 2/1 infector, but the biggest thing is when Rats enters the battlefield, each player gets a poison counter. So this is one of the cards with Muldrotha. If you can recur this card multiple times, it can really help out towards getting everybody to 10 poison counters. Our next one is also not a creature, but it's a way to get multiple poison counters, and it's not really removal. So it is Caressa Phyrexia. It's black, and 3. And target player draws 3 cards, loses 3 life, and then they get 3 poison counters, which puts them a third of the way towards death. So this card is great for, with that casting cost, finishing somebody off who's at 7 poison counters, or if you have a proliferator coming in, somebody who's at 4 or at 6 poison counters or something like that. You can also use it on yourself. You shouldn't be getting too many poison counters. You can get the poison counters from the Rats as well. You can also get the poison counters from this. So if you do cast this on yourself because you need the card advantage, just be careful with how many poison counters you give yourself in this deck, because you can poison yourself out. The next card is Hand of Praetors, which is your Infect Lord. It's a black and 3 colorless for a 3/2 Infector. However, other creatures you control with Infect get +1/+1. And this is also a golden card in this deck, in the fact that whenever you cast a creature spell with Infect, target player gets a poison counter. So not as great as Rats, where just all opponents get a poison counter. This one, you can, with the amount of cards that have Infect in here, if you have to recur them out of the graveyard with Hand of the Praetors out, you can start giving somebody a poison counter one shot at a time until they're dead. Our next one is Ichorclaw Mirror for 2 colorless, and hopefully this light's okay. It's a 1/1 infector. However, it does have a bonus that whenever it becomes blocked, it gets +2/+2, which makes it a 3/3 infector. So it can take down considerably big monsters as well. The -1/-1 counters allow you to take down some pretty big monsters with some pretty small creatures. Our next Infect in our suite is Phyrexian Swarmlord. It's a 4/4 infector for 2 green and 4 colorless, and this works well in the mid and the late game, because at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a 1/1 green insect creature token with Infect onto the battlefield for each poison counter your opponents have. So if you're playing in a pod and you have 2 on one person, 3 on the other, and 3 on the other, that's 8 poison counters total. You get 8 1/1 infectors into your pool to try to finish the game out. Our next is Blighted Agent. This one's great for late game also if you have a stalemate board. It's a 1/1 infector that can't be blocked for a blue and a colorless. We're running most of the good infectors in green, blue, and black. Our next is Viridian Corruptor, green, colorless. Infect, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy an artifact. So we have a little bit of destruction on an Infect card, and we can recur it with Muldrotha if it dies to destroy more artifacts. We have Blight Widow, which is a 2/4 reach with Infect. It's green and 3 colorless. We have Reaper of Sheldred, which is a 2/5 infector for a black and 4 colorless. However, it has another special ability on this one as well, and it's when a source deals damage to it, that source's controller gets a poison counter. So it makes for a great defender. If somebody's at 9 poison counters, they can't really attack in on you because they'll get their last poison counter and die. Then we have the Plague Stringer, which is an evasion infector for a black and a colorless. It's a 1/1 flyer. We have Necropede, which, since we have Proliferate, all these -1/-1s get bigger, so you destroy somebody's board pretty quick. This is a 1/1 infector, and when it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you get to put a -1/-1 on any target creature. It's a 2 mana casting cost artifact creature. We have the good old Rot Wolf, which is also has a special. It's a 2/2 infector for a green and 2 colorless, and whenever a creature is dealt damage by Rot Wolf this turn, and it's put into the graveyard, you get to draw a card. I haven't had that happen too many times, but it's there. This one's a great one to finish out a game as well. It's Spinebiter, 2 green and 4 colorless for a 3/4 infector. However, it has a special ability that's great, that you may have Spinebiter assign its combat damage as if it wasn't blocked. So you can take that 3 attack power and immediately put it on a person, which gives them 3 poison counters. We have Glistener Elf, which most people who play Pauper would be familiar with this. I run this in my Pauper Infect deck. It's a 1/1 infector for 1 green, comes down turn 1, attacks in on turn 2, starts getting Infect on people. We have Core Prowler, which is 4 colorless. It's an infector, but since we're proliferating into our poison counters, when it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you proliferate. So you're proliferating poison counters or -1/-1 counters. We're almost through the infectors here. Our biggest infector is the Phyrexian Juggernaut. I am not running Blightsteel Colossus. It's just too expensive. So this is the biggest one we're running. It's a 5/5 infector for 6 mana, so it can do a lot of damage quickly, and it just has to attack each turn if able, which isn't too much of a problem because if it dies and we have Muldrotha out, we could just bring it out again. And last but not least in our Infect package is the Flesh Eater Imp, which is also a great card to finish off games. It's 1 black and 3 colors for a flying 2/2 infector. However, if it gets through, you have the ability to sack a creature to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. So if it gets through and it's a 2/2 and you're down to just one person with no poison counters on them, and they decide to unblock or not block this creature, and you have 8 other creatures on the battlefield, then you can sack them all into the Flesh Eater Imp and immediately deal 10 poison counter damage right there. So that's everything we're running in terms of Infect. So it's a decent sized Infect suite. It's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 21 Infect creatures and a couple other ways to get poison counters started. You really have to run through some play testing. I've realized I really have to run this many to get a higher probability chance of getting an Infector out really early on the battlefield, so I can get everybody a poison counter, because if you can't get everybody a poison counter early, most of the time you just get screwed with this deck. So it is a casual deck that's just fun to play. So the next suite we're going to go through is our Proliferate section of this. So we saw a couple Proliferate cards already with the Infectors, but here's a lot of our other Proliferate cards that we just want to go through, and after we get the poison counter on, we want to try to get a steady state so that way we can just proliferate them to death. So our first one is Flux Channeler, and this one's great. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, simply proliferate. So this is a 2/2 human wizard, and for any of your other spells that are non-creatures, you proliferate. It's a great card. There's actually, let me find it in here, so that way I can put it right next to it. So also that came out of War of the Spark. Also coming out of the War of Spark was Evolution Sage, which is whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, Proliferate. It's a 3/2 for a green and 2 colorless. So those two cover everything except for creature spells to proliferate. Any lands, any non-creature spells, you simply cast it and you proliferate. So our next card, which could have gone in removal, but I put it here, it's Grim Affliction, 1 black, 2 colorless. Put a -1/-1 counter on a creature and then proliferate. So you're basically putting a -2/-2 counter on any creature, and then because you're going to proliferate the moment after you put that -1/-1 counter on. So it'll kill any 2 toughness creature on the board, but then it will also proliferate any other counters you want on the board. Our next one is actually one of my pre-release cards that I pulled at War of the Spark. And I know he's gotten a lot of hate as being a useless card, but I actually really enjoy him. It's Rollisk Apex Hybrid. It's a green-blue 2 colorless for a Flample, Flying Trample. And when it enters the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. That's good because you could put it on your Infectors, and then whenever you proliferate, that just gets bigger, so you have the possibility of striking in for a bunch of poison counters in one turn. And then when it dies, you proliferate, and then you proliferate again. So the only problem that comes into play here is if this card gets exiled, because you don't get the double proliferate trigger. But otherwise, this card does a lot of work. It increases the size. It puts the +1/+1 counters out there, so that way you can make your Infectors bigger. And then if it dies, you get a double proliferate. Not a lot of bad things to say about that card in this particular build. So our next card that proliferates is Fuel for the Cause. 2 blue, 2 colorless. Counter target spell, and then proliferate. We have another creature, which is the Plague Maw Beast. 2 green and 3 colorless. Tap it, choose a creature, sacrifice a creature, and then proliferate. It's a 4/3 body, so it stays out there for a while. And with Muldrotha in play, you can tap, sack a creature, proliferate, and then replay that creature from the graveyard. So this works really great if you can get it with the Ichor Claw, with the Ichor Rats, because you can tap, sack the Ichor Rats, proliferate, then replay the Ichor Rats from your graveyard with Muldrotha to be able to get another poison counter. So that's 2 poison counters, plus if you have some of these other cards out, you can get some other proliferates in the same turn. Our next proliferate card is simply a draw. This is also from War of the Spark. It's Contentious Plan. It's simply you proliferate and then you draw a card for a blue and a colorless. And then another great card. So we had the Flux Channeler was for non-creature spells. The Evolution Sage was for lands. Inexorable Tide is blue, and 3 colors. And whenever you cast any spell, proliferate. So that includes your creature spells. So if you have all of these on the board, you're proliferating a lot. Our next card, which actually should probably be in our destruction pile, our control pile, is actually Spread the Sickness, black and 4 colorless, destroy target creature, and then proliferate. Then not quite as good as Contentious Plan, but still good. For blue and 2 colorless, it's Steady Progress. You simply proliferate, and then you draw a card. Going along with that, we have Tezzeret's Gamble. You draw 2 cards and then proliferate for 3 and a Phyrexian mana. Our first, another proliferate creature is Thrumming Bird. It's a 1/1 flyer for a blue and a colorless, but whenever it deals combat damage to any player, proliferate. So if you have a player that's open and you can get through with this, you can actually proliferate the poison counters on all players. Like I was talking about earlier, we had the creature in the Infect package that had the proliferate for the mana sink into it. The Merfolk Skydiver has the same thing. Excuse me. It comes out early. It's just a blue-green to cast it. It's a 1/1 flyer. And when it enters the battlefield, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. That includes itself. And for 3 green-blue, you can simply proliferate. So it's another way to get multiple proliferate triggers in a turn. If you don't pull the other one, you can pull this one. So like I said, your opponents see it coming. It slowly, the number of poison counters slowly creep up on them, But later, as the turns go on and you have a bigger mana base to work with, you can get a whole lot more proliferate triggers in one turn, and sometimes you can get them from, let's say, 5 proliferate triggers to 10, and they just don't have a way to respond because all those proliferate triggers just happen so fast. A couple of our big proliferate cards is Contagion Clasp. So when it comes into play, put a -1/-1 counter on a creature's 4 mana, tap it, proliferate. It takes 2 to bring it into the battlefield. Great card. Its big brother, Contagion Engine. 6 to bring this one in, and same as the other one, 4 and tap it. When this one enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature target player controls, so it can wipe a player. 4 mana, tap it, proliferate, and then proliferate again. So if you have 10 mana out and somebody has a field of 3/3s, you can put a -1/-1 counter on all of those creatures, tap this, double proliferate, and destroy all creatures of that opponent's that have 3 toughness or less. And then the last one's a land. This one also came out of War of the Spark. It's Karn's Bastion. You can tap and add a colorless mana to your mana pool, or just like the Contagion Clasp, you can 4 mana, tap it, and proliferate. So that's our proliferate package. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 cards in our proliferate package. So that makes up the majority of the deck. We're going to go into the removal package next. So our first removal card is Virulent Wound, and a lot of these cards that I run, it's because I had them laying around, not because they're the best in slot. But it's 1 black, and you put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, and when that creature is put into the graveyard, its controller gets a poison counter. So this works great early on a mana dork, or it works great later when you have a bunch of proliferates to get rid of a big threat, to put a -1/-1 counter on a creature and then just proliferate it to death, and then they get a poison counter. So this is great both. I'd say it's probably better early game to get rid of mana dorks, or mid game when you can get enough proliferate triggers to get a threat off the board and then get that poison counter on somebody if you can't get something like the Ichor Rats out. Our next removals, a great one from War of the Spark. It's Obnixilus's Cruelty. Black and 2 colorless at instant speed. Virulent Wounds at instant speed as well. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn, and if that creature would die, exile it. So great for getting rid of combo pieces that are creatures as well. We have Doomblade. Black and a colorless. Destroy target non-black creature. Our next one that I run in the removal package is the Golgari Charm. This is great against token or weenie decks. But for black and a green, you can choose one of the modes, and 2 of the modes are destruction. One is all creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn, which doesn't work to proliferate that, but it gets rid of a field full of 1/1 tokens. The second mode is to destroy an enchantment, and then the third one is to regenerate each creature you control, which could possibly help against certain board wipes where it says creatures can't be regenerated or something like that, to save your board state. It's actually happened once where I used this to regenerate all of my creatures. It was one of the white creature removals that didn't stop you from regenerating creatures, it was just destroy them, and I managed to keep my entire board state with this card. So great flexibility there. Our next one is Death Sprout, also from War of the Spark. I built this deck, or had the idea of this, when I started seeing everything that was out in War of the Spark. So there's quite a few cards in here from that. This is colorless, black, black, green. You get to destroy a target creature, and then you get to search your library for a basic land card and put it into the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. So it serves as a shuffle effect for your library. It's mana ramp for late, early, mid-game, and it also is creature destruction. Then we have Tragic Slip, which is, and I believe all of these are at instant speed. Yep. This one's at instant speed as well. Most of my removal, I think all of my removal is at instant speed. Yep, certainly is. It's the way I like to roll. 1 black, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Great, fine, dandy. However, where it really shines is with its morbid ability, and that is the creature gets -13/-13 until end of turn if that creature died this turn, if a creature died this turn. So this is the fourth card that deals with minus counter or minus offense and defense. I've run across a lot of problems in my play group of indestructible creatures, and of course in my meta, since that happens, putting minus things onto creatures is one of the best ways to kill them, because you can't just destroy them with some of these other things. Our next destruction is Return to Nature. It's another modal one. Green and a colorless. You can either destroy an artifact, you can destroy an enchantment, or you can exile a card from a graveyard. I don't have a lot of graveyard hate in the deck. This is the only way where I could possibly get one combo piece for somebody out of a graveyard if it's necessary. It's really here just to destroy a pain in the butt artifact or enchantment. Then we have Putrefy, 1 black-green. Destroy target artifact or creature, and it can't be regenerated. Reality Shift. I actually run this in my Tetsuko deck as well. It's one of my favorite blue removals. Exile target creature is control and manifest the top card of their library. So sometimes it could be worse for them to get a free card, but for the most part, this takes care of a threat on the board, and a lot of times what they manifest doesn't end up becoming a creature. We have a flip card. Generally, I play this for the statue side. The status side is target creature gets +1/+1 and gains Death Touch until end of the turn. I've only used that side once. The other side, the statue side, is 2 black-green, destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment. So just even more removal for this deck. And last but not least is Price of Fame. It's black and 3 colorless, and it costs 2 less if it targets a legendary creature, which is everybody's commander. And you can destroy the target creature, and then you get to surveil too. So that's our removal package. Our last is, our next package is kind of the other things that don't fit into those 3 main categories and isn't part of the mana base. So we'll go with first Kira's Behemoth Beckoner. This is also from War of the Spark. It is the only Planeswalker I'm running in this deck. Its static ability really isn't that important. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. That doesn't happen much in this deck. Where it's at is this Planeswalker enters with 7 loyalty, and its -1 ability is untap target permanent. So your best place to be is to untap your Contagion engine and be able to do it again. So that's play Kiora, and if you can untap your Contagion engine with 8 mana on the field, you get 4 Proliferate triggers. So like I was saying earlier, sometimes you just proliferate somebody to death and they don't see it coming because it's a slow creep up, and then all of a sudden it's bam, and they take 5 or 6 Proliferate triggers in a turn. Kiora Behemoth Beckoner is one of the enablers for that to happen. Our next one that's not really part of any package is Aqueous Form. This one is to get through a board state that's just static and nobody can do anything because everything's even on both sides. It's an enchant creature, and it's simply enchanted creature can't be blocked. So if you can get a +1/+1 counter on one of your infectors and then proliferate a bunch, drop this on it, you can kill somebody in one shot just like you can with any infect creature like a Blightsteel. Just takes a little more work. But this plays a little nicer in the fact that you don't get hated on immediately, or at least in my play group I haven't. Our next one is Destined to Lead. So the first part of this is target creature gets +1/+0 and gains indestructible until end of turn. Also at instant speed, great for being able to protect one of your infectors and let it deal a little more damage and just swing in and not care what happens. Great combat trick. And then the lead portion of it is an Aftermath for a green and 3 colorless. And you get to cast this from your graveyard, and then you exile the whole card. But all creatures able to block target creature must do so. So if you have a static board state and you're down to 1 person and you're not worried about a crackback, you cast this on one of your 1/1 infectors, they have to block with all of their creatures on that creature, and then all of your other infectors get through to kill them. So that's where that one's at. We have Trailblazer's Boots is the only equipment card in the deck, and it's basically non-basic land walk. It's another way like the Aqueous Form to try to get through a static board state where you can get your infectors through, because almost everybody runs a non-basic land. From War of the Spark to search some things out, we have Bonds of Flourishing. For green and a colorless, you look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal any permanent from among them and put it into your hand. The rest on the bottom of your library, and you gain 3 life. Simply, it's a brainstorm for green, kind of, with a gain life function. And last but not least in this package is Mystical Tutor. It allows you to go search up one of the draw cards that proliferate, any of the proliferate spells. It allows you to do a bunch of different things, and that's the last of that. So all that's left really is our mana ramp package and our mana package, our land package. So we're simply running Manalith, we're running Commander Sphere, all the staples, Darksteel Ingot, Mana Geode, Gift of Paradise for being able to make extra mana. We're running Soul Ring, and we're running New Horizons, which is kind of like our other green card, Gift of Paradise, down here. It does the same exact thing. Gift of Paradise gives us 3 life, whereas New Horizons puts +1/+1 creature on +1/+1 counter on one of our creatures. We much prefer New Horizons if we have an Infect creature out. And then last but not least is our mana base. Being a 3-color deck, the mana base for this deck is a little more intensive, but I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I'm not running any duels. I'm only running lands that I had available to me. So the first one is the Tricolor Opulence Palace. It's just simply a tricolor land. Produce any color mana ones are next. So we have Gateway Plaza, which is always cheap. We have Command Tower, and we have Unknown Shores. Next are our black-green lands, Foul Orchard, Golgari Guildgate, green-blue lands, Woodland Stream, Simic Guildgate, and Breeding Pool. I happen to have this shock land, so I threw it in there. Next is blue-black. We have Creeping Tar Pit. I had this one in my collection as well. We have Dismal Blackwater, Dimir Guildgate, Jawar Isle Refuge. Then we have some, this one allows you to tap for green, or it has the charge counter, so you can get any color out of it for 2 times. But with the charge counter, since it is a counter, you can proliferate those counters bigger. So the Vivid Grove can produce any color mana you need multiple times. We're running Inventor's Fair, so that way we can go get the Contagion Engine or the Contagion Clasp. Vivid Creek is just like Vivid Grove except for blue. I don't have the one for black. We have Rogue's Passage, so we can make one of our creatures unblockable to get in for the infect damage. Grasping Dunes, because it puts a -1/-1 counter on a creature, so it allows us to get that creature into a -1/-1 and then start proliferating. Then we have 6 swamps, 6 forests, 5 islands. So that's my weird take. Let me make sure that, excuse me, it was 7 swamps. This is my weird take on Muldrotha, and a weird take on Infect with an emphasis on Proliferate. So like I said, this deck doesn't get hated on a ton in the play group like most Infect decks do, because they can see those poison counters ramping up. It's not like all of a sudden you go after one person, you attack them, they're dead, then you have to deal with the crackback from the other 2 people. This one's more built around getting a poison counter on everybody, proliferating everybody to death, so that way you don't have to, your creatures can stay untapped, so that way you can block with them. And it makes it so that way you don't have to swing out on somebody to kill somebody. And then hopefully you have enough gas to move on to the next person. So with the Proliferate that came out of War of the Spark, it made this much easier to do, and I waited until that point to build this deck. I'd always wanted to build an Infect Commander deck, and it ended up taking a really weird twist that I didn't expect. So if you guys liked this one, give me a comment down below. And I have a couple more Commander decks that I have done that are actually over in my collection behind me. I'll run out quickly, but I have some other ones that I'm working on. I'm working on a Feather Alternate Wind deck, and I'm also working on an Estrid deck. Those are the two that I have in work right now, and I also have a pretty good start on a Hapatra Vizier of Poisoners deck. But a lot of those cards, being since that relies on some Proliferator in here, so like the Contagion Engine, the Contagion Class, the Cards Bastion, I only have one copy of those. So hopefully everybody has a great New Horizons pre-release weekend. Leave a comment down below if you want to see more deck techs like this or other deck techs. I can do my Infect Pauper deck tech as well. I may do that one later this week to follow up on this being my Infect Commander deck. But I hope everybody has a great weekend, a great New Horizons pre-release weekend, and as always, may Keep Calm Kitty be with you.